My name is Ruth Miller. I've spent most of my 63 years learning how to stand quietly in rooms that were never built for people like me. But that day at the Greenwich Country Club, the quiet felt heavier than usual. I'd spent 3 months saving for a navy dress I found on clearance, and a small antique jewelry box I thought would make a meaningful gift for my daughter's wedding. It was supposed to be a proud moment, a celebration of love and new beginnings. When I walked through those tall glass doors, my heels clicking against the marble, I saw her standing by the staircase in her white gown. My heart swelled like it always did when I looked at her. But in the next heartbeat, everything changed. She met my eyes and looked right through me. No flicker of recognition. No smile. Just a calm, distant expression like I was part of the staff setting up her dream day. The air in the room shifted. Conversation dipped. I could feel the whispers before I even heard them. For a second, I wanted to believe she didn't see me. But I knew better. I told myself to keep breathing, to stay composed. I didn't make a scene. I simply stood there, holding the gift I'd chosen with love, realizing that something inside me had just cracked, and that was only the beginning. I remember standing in the lobby, trying to convince myself that maybe this was all just a misunderstanding. The marble floor gleamed like ice under the bright chandeliers, and the sound of laughter drifted through the air, light and distant like it came from another world entirely. A man in a black suit, probably a security guard, approached with that polite, professional look people wear when they're about to ask you to move along. I understood before he even opened his mouth. My daughter had made sure I'd be directed toward the back, away from the guests, away from her perfect moment. I kept my voice steady, thanked him softly, and stepped aside. There was no use arguing. I'd spent a lifetime working hard, raising her alone, and learning that dignity sometimes means swallowing your pride before anyone can see it break. I glanced down at my navy dress, simple but neat, pressed the night before. It wasn't designer, but it was clean and chosen with love. In my hands, the jewelry box felt heavier than it should have. Maple wood, hand-carved roses, the kind of small treasure you pick when you can't afford diamonds but still want to give something that lasts. The crowd shimmered in sequins and silk. Women moved like they'd been born on marble floors. Men spoke in voices that carried confidence I'd never learned to fake. I could feel their eyes brushing over me, soft enough to pretend it wasn't judgment, but sharp enough to leave marks. And then I caught sight of her again. My daughter laughing with people who looked like they belonged there. She didn't glance my way. Not once. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw a shadow cross her face. A tiny crack in the mask she wore so perfectly. But maybe that was just me, hoping. So I took a breath, stood a little taller, and promised myself I wouldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of people who already thought I didn't belong. But deep down, I knew this wasn't confusion. This was choice. And that truth was going to hurt far worse than the silence in that room. The moment in that lobby didn't come out of nowhere. Looking back, I can see every step that led us there, each one small enough to excuse. Until suddenly it wasn't. It started about 1.5 years before the wedding. When Jenna brought home the man, she said she wanted to marry Chase Whitaker. He had the kind of charm that looked rehearsed. Every word seemed polished. Every gesture deliberate. Like someone who'd been told all his life that doors would open just because he asked nicely. I remember feeling proud that my daughter had found someone successful. But there was something about the way she changed around him. Her voice softened. Her posture straightened. Her laugh came out more careful than I'd ever heard before. I cooked dinner that night, our old family favorite. Pot roast with mashed potatoes and green beans from my little backyard garden. The same meal I'd made for birthdays and homecomings. I thought the smell might remind her of home. Of us. Instead, it made her uncomfortable. Like the scent itself carried memories she didn't want him to know about. Over the next few months, She spent more time in Greenwich with his family than she did with me. When she called, the warmth in her voice was thinner, as if she were speaking through glass. One night around 8:15, I got a call that would change everything. She said there were adjustments to be made to the wedding guest list. Her tone was polite, businesslike, almost detached. I remember setting my pen down and listening. Adjustments. It was such a small word for something that cut so deep. She explained it in a way that sounded reasonable, formal setting. Limited seating. The Whitakers' expectations. But underneath the polished phrases was a clear message: my world didn't fit in theirs. By the time she finished, only 3 seats remained for my side me. My sister Karen, and our neighbor Mrs. Alvarez, who helped raise Jenna when I worked late shifts. I told myself it was fine, that maybe she was just nervous about appearances. But something inside me knew better. That was the first real twist, the moment I realized I wasn't being included less out of necessity and more out of design. I should have seen it then. But love, especially a mother's love, has a way of turning red flags into excuses. And that blindness would cost me far more than I could have imagined. A few weeks after that call, I was invited to the Whitakers' home in Greenwich. Even before I stepped inside, I knew it wasn't really an invitation, it was an inspection. Their house looked like something from a magazine: white columns, manicured lawns, and a front door tall enough to make you feel smaller just by standing under it. Inside, everything gleamed. The air smelled faintly of lilies and wealth clean. Cold and distant. Portraits lined the walls, each one a declaration of legacy. I remember thinking how quiet the place was, how every sound seemed to bounce back at me like I was being measured. Jenna moved through those rooms like she'd been practicing for years. Her voice was softer, her laughter timed perfectly to match theirs. I watched her slip into that world so easily. And for the first time, I realized she wasn't just in love with a man, she was in love with the idea of never looking back. His mother, Patricia, had a way of smiling without warmth, as if politeness was a tool rather than a choice. His father, Edmund, barely looked up from his newspaper. I felt invisible, like a placeholder in a scene that had been perfectly staged. Still, I kept trying to find a reason for it all, some kindness I might have missed, some misunderstanding that would explain the distance. But the truth was simpler, colder. They didn't want me gone out of cruelty. They wanted me gone out of design. And soon, I'd understand just how deliberate that design really was. The morning of the wedding came gray and cold, as if the sky already knew what kind of day it would be. I woke up before sunrise, too anxious to eat, and stared at the navy dress hanging on my closet door. It looked dignified, simple, and humble, exactly like me. By 8:30, I was already on the road from New Haven to Greenwich, repeating to myself that it was still my daughter's wedding, and that love was supposed to be enough. When I arrived, the country club shimmered with marble and glass, polished so bright, it almost hurt to look at. Staff rushed about arranging centerpieces. Guests in tailored suits and gowns sipped champagne as if it were air. I stood near the back, clutching the small jewelry box I'd wrapped with trembling hands. It was the only gift I could afford, but it came from everything I had left to give. Then came the seating. A young usher smiled politely and guided me to the farthest corner of the ballroom, behind a tall pillar that blocked nearly half the view of the altar. My name tag sat neatly on a table tucked beside the wall, next to 2 other cards, Karen Miller and Mrs. Alvarez. That was it. 3 seats for my entire side of the family. When Karen arrived, she squeezed my hand, her expression saying everything her words didn't need to. She tried to make a joke about cozy seating, but even she couldn't hide the anger behind her smile. I forced a laugh, because crying would have made it worse. From that spot, I watched rows of elegant strangers fill the front seats, all Whitakers and their friends. Their jewelry sparkled under the chandelier light. Their laughter floated like music that wasn't meant for me. When Jenna appeared, walking down the aisle in a gown that shimmered like frost, the room held its breath. She was radiant, every inch of her glowing, with that effortless grace I'd once hoped she got from me. But when her eyes swept past me, there was no sign she saw me at all. And as the photographer moved through the crowd capturing family moments, I overheard her mention that there would be no brideside photos that day. None at all. That was when the numbness settled in. Because in that instant, I understood what this wedding really was, not a union of families, but the quiet erasure of one. Still, I stayed seated, silent, holding the gift in my lap and waiting for the next chance to breathe. When the ceremony ended, everyone flowed into the reception hall. Music, laughter, champagne, the kind of joy that looks effortless from the outside. I stood near the edges again, where I always seemed to end up. The lights sparkled against crystal glasses. Waiters moved gracefully through the crowd, and I tried to disappear into the rhythm of it all. That's when it happened. A woman in a silver dress, dripping with diamonds, turned toward me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She handed me her empty glass and asked for another drink, like it was the most natural thing in the world. For a split second, I froze. Then I felt my hands move before my mind could catch up, taking the glass automatically, because that's what decades of service jobs had trained me to do. I stood there holding that flute, realizing that in this room, I wasn't the mother of the bride. I was background. I was invisible. A real server passed by a young woman, maybe 21. Kind eyes. The kind of tired I used to wear when Jenna was little. She paused, studying me with quiet confusion. I told her gently that everything was fine, that I wasn't staff. Just finding my bearings. She nodded, embarrassed for me, not realizing how used I was to that feeling. I set the glass down on the nearest table, straightened my dress, and tried to breathe again. Around me, the party glowed with wealth and ease. And I understood something painful but true. The people in this room didn't see cruelty in what they'd done. They saw order. And that thought, more than the humiliation itself, broke something deeper in me. But fate wasn't done showing me the reason I was really there. After the champagne moment, I slipped away to clear my head. I told myself I just needed a breath, to a bit of quiet before I tried again to blend in. The hallways beyond the ballroom were lined with dark wood and gold-framed mirrors, every reflection showing a woman doing her best not to fall apart. That's when I heard them. Voices behind a half-open office door. At first, it was just noise until I caught certain words. Investigation. Sec. Family trust. Shell companies. I stopped walking. My heart didn't race from fear, it slowed. Focused. Years of working as a claims adjuster train you to listen differently. You start hearing what people mean, not just what they say. The tone of those voices wasn't gossip. It was damage control. I leaned slightly toward the door, just enough to recognize the speakers: Chase, his father, and Patricia. Their calm, practiced voices carried a thread of panic underneath. They talked about making sure no one with the wrong professional background could draw attention to their financial patterns. That phrase landed like a thunderclap. That was me. The wrong background. The reason they'd worked so hard to erase me from this wedding. My job wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous for them. In that moment, humiliation turned into clarity. Every cut, every snub, every careful exclusion, it all made sense now. This wasn't about class or reputation. It was about control. About hiding something big enough to ruin them. I stepped back quietly. Heart steady. Breath calm. I didn't make a sound. I just knew whatever game they were playing. I had finally found the edge of their secret. And from that point on, I wasn't just a mother at her daughter's wedding anymore. I was an investigator following a trail. When I stepped away from that door, I didn't head back to the ballroom right away. I followed instinct, the same instinct that had carried me through 20 years of investigating fraud. Catching patterns other people overlooked? I wasn't angry anymore. I was alert. Near the club's side hallway, a small business office sat half open. Papers spread across a mahogany desk. Someone had been careless, distracted by the chaos of the event. I didn't plan it. But the moment I saw those documents, something inside me clicked into place. My eyes moved quickly, scanning numbers, signatures, claims, and there it was, the same name repeating again and again: Chase Whitaker. Insurance claims for accidental damage, fire loss, vehicle total. Each filed just before major expenses. A yacht fire right before a loan payment. A totaled BMW the month before the engagement. An apartment flood the week before the ring was purchased. Each one neat, clean, perfectly timed. Too perfect. I didn't take anything. I didn't have to. I'd learned how to document without leaving a trace. A quick photo here. Another there. Every angle stored quietly on my phone. The evidence wasn't just about money, it was about a pattern. One only someone like me would see. I stood there for a moment, breathing evenly. My reflection caught in the glossy surface of that desk. In another life, I might have felt guilty, but that guilt didn't belong to me anymore. I knew what I'd found wasn't just fraud, it was motive. It was the real reason they wanted to erase me. They thought a working-class woman from New Haven couldn't possibly bring down their empire. But they'd forgotten something. Simple experience is its own kind of power. And now, I had exactly what I needed. The only question left was when and how to use it. By the time I returned to the ballroom, the reception was in full swing. The band was playing a soft jazz tune. Couples were laughing. Cameras flashing. Glasses clinking in perfect rhythm. Everything looked flawless from the outside, an image built to last. But I knew what was hiding underneath that polish now. And I wasn't going to let it stay buried. I waited for the right moment. It came around 9:15. Right after the cake was cut. I walked up to the bandleader, showed him my ID, and asked for a brief moment on the microphone. He hesitated, confused, but I could see the respect in his eyes. He nodded. When the room quieted, I stepped onto the floor. My heart didn't pound, it stayed steady. Clear. I told everyone who I was. The mother of the bride. And for a heartbeat. The whole room froze. Some guests looked startled, others looked guilty. Like they already sensed something was about to break. I spoke calmly. The way I used to when explaining a difficult case at work. I told them I'd come across some interesting documents that evening, documents tied to a long trail of insurance claims, all bearing the same signatures. All suspiciously timed. I explained that I'd already sent copies to the SEC, the FBI, and 3 major newspapers. Then I lifted my phone, showing the screen as quiet gasps spread through the crowd. Chase's face went pale. His father's hand clenched tight around his glass. And Patricia's polished smile disappeared. The truth had finally entered their perfect room. And there was no turning it away. Just as I finished, the sound of footsteps echoed from the side doors. Federal agents stepped into the ballroom, badges glinting under the chandeliers. In seconds, the entire Whitaker legacy began to crumble. Guests whispered. Cameras flashed again, this time not for celebration, but for evidence. And through it all, I stood still. Not vengeful. Not angry, just certain. Because justice doesn't always come loud or fast. Sometimes, it walks in quietly, wearing a mother's calm face. And that night, justice had perfect timing. The room erupted the moment the agents announced their names. Voices rose. Chairs scraped. and the sound of crystal shattering against marble echoed somewhere behind me. In the middle of the chaos, I felt an odd kind of calm settle over me. It wasn't triumph, it was relief. For the first time that day, I could finally breathe without shame pressing against my chest. I saw Jenna standing frozen near the cake table, her hands trembling, her eyes wide in disbelief. All the polish, the practiced confidence, it was gone. She looked like a child again. The one who used to cling to me when thunderstorms rattled our old windows. For a second, my heart broke for her. Not because of what she'd done, but because I knew she had no idea what she'd just married into. I walked toward her slowly, past the scattered guests and stunned silence. I didn't scold her or demand an apology. I simply placed my hands over hers and told her quietly, from the heart, that when she was ready to come home, I'd be there. Not as someone she had to impress, but as the mother who still believed she could find her way back. Then I picked up my purse, turned toward the door, and walked out into the cool night air. Sometimes strength isn't about staying and fighting. Sometimes it's about walking away with your dignity intact. 3 days later, a soft knock came at my door just after sunset. When I opened it, Jenna stood there still wearing the same going-away outfit from the wedding. Her eyes were red, her mascara smudged, and for the first time in years, her voice trembled when she said my name. She didn't have to explain. I already knew. I stepped aside, and she fell into my arms like the little girl who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares. We stood there for a long time, no apologies, no lectures, just the quiet understanding that healing had to start somewhere. Since that day, we've been rebuilding. Slowly and honestly, I told her that love doesn't mean blindness, and forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing truth, even when it hurts. Sometimes, the cost of silence is far higher than the price of speaking up. That wedding cost the Whitakers $300,000. But it taught me something priceless, that dignity is worth more than any inheritance. If this story touched you, share it. Tell me where you're listening from, because your voice, your story, might be the one someone else needs to find their courage tonight. Love, truth, and second chances, that's what still holds us together.